Hundreds of tractors nose to tail in central London, driving past Downing Street, farmers warning that the government's policies for agriculture spell the death knell for Britain's family farms. The second time in less than a month that the countryside's come to town. Will the government listen? I'm Johann Tasker.
And I'm Louise Impey.
And this is the Farmers Weekly podcast. So Louise, here we are, central Whitehall, the middle of London, hundreds of tractors, some of them driving, some of them already parked up, hundreds of tractors driven by hundreds of farmers coming here again to remind the government that its autumn budget poses, as they say, an existential threat to the future of farming in the UK. In particular, this decision to impose 20% inheritance tax on farm assets worth more than £1 million.
Yeah, noisy, isn't it? They've really have put on a show of strength today, haven't they?
It is really, really noisy, and I do hope that listeners can hear what we're saying, because we've got air horns going, we've got the odd police siren, I guess the general sort of sound of the city, but also, these hundreds of tractors arriving at Whitehall, arriving at Parliament Square, some of them being driven into London, some of them coming on the back of low loaders.
Yes, and they certainly have arrived, haven't they? This is a real show of strength, I think. Passionate but peaceful, I would say. I mean, obviously, apart from all the noise, but it's a good-natured protest, just like the last one was. They're not going to go away anytime soon, are they? I mean, that's very obvious when you see who's turned up today and the strength of feeling, the messages that their tractors are conveying. Put it quite literally, they won't be able to afford to pay this tax in its current form. That is the headline moment, if you like. Of course, they've got other concerns as well. We've spoken before on the podcast about some of the other measures that came in the budget. It came in, if you like, under the radar. So there we're talking about that sort of slashing of the basic payment scheme, the de-link payments. We're talking about the extra employment costs that the national insurance increase has put on. These are things that also really affect farms. But this inheritance tax it's a big one. They really do feel that that's a betrayal. They were told that wasn't going to happen not that long ago either. It is happening. We hope that they're going to see some sense. It has been introduced in a very bad way, in the wrong way.
And when you say introduced in a bad way, this decision coming into effect overnight in April 2026, this requirement that farmers will have to pay 20% inheritance tax on assets worth a total of more than £1 million. Not enough cash in the system for farmers to be able to pay that, which means that in order to meet that liability, many of them fear that they'll have to sell off at least part of the family farm, making the rest of the family farming business unviable.
Yes, and one of the really interesting things for me today is that there are many non-farmers here, and they are very, very supportive. And there were fears, I think, that we would lose some of that public support if we went ahead with another protest so soon, but we're not seeing that.
So the second time then in 3 weeks that, as we said in the intro, the countryside has come to town, but farmers this time around coming and arriving on their tractors. There are a lot more, I guess there's a lot more media interest. We're surrounded by people with camera equipment, with film equipment. It is a sight to behold.
It really is. I mean, it's awesome. I'm really quite struck by this. I had no idea how visually strong this would be, and for me, it really is today. I think it's amazing. And some of these people left home very, very early this morning to get here, and then, of course, navigate the London traffic, which is never very easy. So, yeah, it's a wow moment.
Let's go and find out and see where some of them have come from.
Martin Brandreth, and I come from Coventry.
Very colourful, lit-up tractor.
Yes, we had a Christmas tractor run for charity at the weekend, so that hence all these three are still lit up.
So let's have a look at the tractor then. You've got, what is it on the front?
A Minion.
There's a Minion on the front. I should know.
And there's more Minions there. That's my dad's Tron.
Right, and British farming, Keir today, Keir Starmer, obviously Keir today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah, representing what Keir is doing to farming.
And it's come down from Coventry on the low loader. You didn't drive it all the way.
Drove it all the way.
You drove it all the way. What time did you set off?
5 o'clock, 6 hours to get here.
That's amazing. Well done to
Yes.
you. What are you hoping the outcome from today?
Well, they listen a little bit more and start to understand where we're coming from and not just think that we're making it up.
What sort of farm have you got at home?
Mixed dairy arable, relatively small, but it will affect us quite a lot.
And in what way will it affect you?
So we only have roughly about 120 acres, and it would mean that potentially we'd have to sell a large chunk of our farm, and it would mean that we wouldn't be able to function. And I'm a fourth generation.
So what's the answer from your point of view? Just annul the budget, as it were, or do you think that some of these measures could be phased in? Would that make it more easy?
I think the ideal is not have it at all. I don't think any form of inheritance tax for anyone is helpful. You should be taxed on profits, not on assets like that. But I think realistically they should have, if they were thinking about doing this, they should have looked at it for longer and came and introduced it slowly, not just gone round bang and then look at it. It's just the wrong way of doing things.
I'm Amy Deacon and I'm from Hertfordshire, St Albans.
And why are you here?
Basically to support British farmers. We're farmers, we've grown up on a family farm. My grandpa farmed, my great-grandpa farmed, and we'd quite like to farm, and this might stop it for us basically, and for our children one day. So yeah, we just want to support everyone, and yeah.
And what do you farm back home?
We're arable and sheep.
And how will the family farm tax, inheritance tax affect you then?
Well, it'll affect all farmers basically, because it's just going to massively affect family farms and basically bankrupt farmers. So yeah.
Matt Golding.
Hi Matt. What have we got here? We've got a David Brown Selectomatic 990.
Yeah, 1967, 990. We've been on the farm since the mid-70s, I think Dad bought it, second hand.
And where have you come from?
Ely, Cambridgeshire.
You didn't drive this all the way there? Low load
11 mile an hour. I had to drive it 6 miles yesterday to low load, and that was long enough.
So you came down from Ely, you farm yourself?
Yeah, we do. We've got a 200-acre farm up in the fence, grow potatoes and wheat and a little bit of hay. But we don't use this. These two here are mine as well. 956, that's a classic as well. I collect old David Brown and case tractors, so that's a good little run out for them.
And how's what the government's done going to affect you?
Well, that will finish you if you have to do it, because we're on a small farm anyway. We can't afford to lose the land. We want to build the farm and not lose land. And if we have to sell land off to pay the tax, you have to pay capital gains on top of that as well. And I'm third generation, and I want there to be a fourth and fifth generation. Build the business up and not make it smaller.
And you've got some of those future generations here today.
Yeah, they are. They help me out on the farm, and they're good lads, and they've got a real future in it, and they love it. And I keep putting them off it, to be honest with you. I say, go and do something else, what you earn money at, but they just love coming. Driving the tractors and weekends and stuff. Help me out, and that's a shame because they're very enthusiastic. So let's just hope that they can sort this out.
So Louise, some of the voices there, they really have come from far and wide, not just the outskirts of the city, not just places like Essex and Hertfordshire, but further afield from Ely and also from nearer Coventry, from Leicestershire. A fair old drive.
Oh yeah, fair old drive, especially in a tractor, my goodness. So, but it really matters to them, doesn't it? They needed to be here, they wanted to be here. I think they would all do the same thing again, given how strong they're feeling about this and given what the future looks like at the moment. I think they do it again at a drop of a hat, to be honest with you. So it's good to see them here. I think they've really made a mark, if you like. Some of them, of course, aren't in tractors. They're in other sorts of farm vehicles, but they've all decided to turn up and make a united front.
Yeah, certainly not everyone in a tractor. I've even seen a Manitou telehandler trundling its way along Whitehall.
Different, isn't it, for the centre of London? But there you go. Yes, we've seen them all shapes and sizes, all colours, all different types of vehicles, but all farm themed.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. We're here in the centre of London, the second time in 3 weeks, for a protest against the government's autumn budget, in particular this decision to impose 20% inheritance tax on farming assets worth more than £1 million. Louise, the government's tried to preempt this protest with a special announcement today, underlining what they say is their commitment to UK agriculture.
Yes, they have. It's impeccable timing, isn't it? Or is it rather suspicious timing? But anyway, they have made an announcement today which says that they are putting £350 million into farming. And this, of course, is part of their new deal for farmers. So the information that we've received says that 31,000 farmers are going to benefit from this. If we take a bit of a closer look at it, what it actually is, it's the unveiling, if you like, of the new and improved countryside stewardship higher tier scheme. So new and improved, expanded and enhanced, depends which wording you want to take. So what this means, this is going to open in 2025. I don't think we can be any more specific than that at the moment, but I seem to remember that they're saying it'll open in the summer. We are going to see 132 actions introduced in this, and apparently 151 capital items. Now, there's a question connected to those, is that will we actually have the funding for those? We don't know, because as we reported on last week's podcast, the funding for capital grants, capital items, is on hold at the moment.
This is something that Labour have promised, this new deal for farming, ever since they came into power. They said that they were going to have this new deal for UK agriculture. A new deal for farming, but is it new money? I mean, it's not, is it?
No, it isn't new money. I mean, this is we've already known about these schemes. We already knew what the timescale was. So, and actually, we spoke about it briefly last week on the podcast when we said that DEFRA was due to announce some of this in December. So, give them their due. They have done. Of course, it's good that we've got some more detail on this, because we were getting, well, the industry was getting very, very worried about where all these schemes were going and whether they were even going to continue. So it is reassuring to hear that it's both countryside stewardship higher tier, and also they have said that there are going to be 14 new endorsed SFI actions. So by the endorsed label means they're the actions that have to be approved first by Natural England or the Forestry Commission or whoever specialist is connected to those actions. So yes, that's good that we've, as I said, good that we've got new detail. I don't really think we can say we've got new money. I mean, this is all funding that was already committed and that we knew about. So we just have to be a bit cautious there.
So when you say that, Louise, is this more certainty or is it more confusion? It sort of seems to be almost half an announcement. Stuff is coming, but there is going to be more detail soon. It doesn't, as a farmer, if I'm a farmer myself, I'm going to listen to this and think, well, I don't know, am I going to be better off or worse off? Who knows?
Yeah, they've done this before, haven't they, DEFRA? An announcement of an announcement, really. But I think in some ways it's good news. They have confirmed things like with the new higher tier scheme, when it's available, is going to again be payments are going to be made quarterly. They're going to have a rolling application window. So all these things that just make these schemes easier to use, if you like, more flexible for farmers and able to fit in with whatever system it is that they're running. So it's good to see that. It's good to hear that. There is still this grey area, I suppose it is, about those whose higher tier schemes are coming to an end now, and obviously it's not going to be ready for who knows how many months. So they are offering mirror agreements for those people so that they don't, lose all the good work that they've been doing. But unfortunately, for those people, that applies at the old payment rate. So although they can keep their schemes, they can roll them over and just carry on, they're not going to see any more money. So that's a shame, but that's a practical detail, I suppose.
And still not answering that big question that farmers want answered, which is the question over inheritance tax. How are farmers going to be able to pay this 20% tax when there simply isn't enough cash in the system to be able to do so without selling off some of your assets?
Yeah, no answers there. I mean, the announcement that we've had today, this is about delivering environmental benefits, really, from your farm. This isn't about any of that wider stuff on succession and taxes and all that sort of thing, which is, equally important to farmers. But I think I've already said this, but I will repeat this. At least we now know they are going to continue with these schemes. There was a real fear that these would just disappear. They may do yet, but at least we know they're going to continue with them. They've also announced that they're going to continue with landscape recovery. So again, that's good to know. We obviously need to see the more detail, and a lot of this isn't going to be available until at least halfway through next year. So there's more to come. Definitely. They've given us, if you like, a direction of travel rather than all the information that we need.
We will put a link to this announcement in the show notes page of this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast, so people can certainly look at that and have as much detail as we have, and wade your way through it and see if it makes sense. Louise, I don't think though that many people will feel that this goes far enough.
Well, they won't do, because they've, of course, lost the trust, haven't they, of the farming community, and they've only got themselves to blame for that. It was a bit fragile before, but they've lost all that completely now. I have to say that one of the other things that came out of today's announcement was the fact that they're going to come up with this 25-year farming roadmap, and quite frankly, that just makes people groan, doesn't it? I mean, a lot of farmers here would say we need to know about the next 25 days or the next 25 weeks, not the next 25 years. They're worried they won't be here in 25 years' time.
And a 25-year plan is all very well to announce, but you'd think that they would already have a plan. I mean, Labour were in opposition for 14 odd years. They have had enough time to come up with a plan, a coherent plan, and a roadmap for where they want us to go. To be thinking about it now is, for a lot of people, is just a little bit vague, and to be honest, too little, too late.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Hundreds of tractors here in central London. Louise, we said before on the podcast that this budget decision to impose 20% inheritance tax on farming assets worth more than £1 million was really the spark, I guess, that lit the touch paper for these protests that we're seeing not only in London but also in Cardiff, in Edinburgh. There have been protests in York as well. Also protests at the port of Holyhead in North Wales. It's not just inheritance tax, though. There's a lot more to this.
There is much, much more to this, and let's not forget that already farmers were feeling quite a bit of pain, probably from the last 2 years before the October budget. So they weren't in a particularly good place before the news came. Then the budget came in, and all of a sudden everything has just compounded. And we understand about the inheritance tax and the feelings on that, but there are other things too, whether it was the carbon tax on fertiliser, which is due to come, not just yet, but it's on its way, whether it's about supply chain fairness. There are all sorts of things that need addressing, I think, is probably the right way of putting it. So it's difficult to pick out. It's going to depend on individual farms and their circumstances as to which one has affected them the most. But we must remember that cash flows on farms in 2025 are going to be very, very tight, and there is going to be some pain. And I think the other thing to point out about that is it's not just farms, obviously, it's all the industries that surround farming. And the people like you and me, Johann, and a lot of other people that we met today, all of our jobs rely on farming being in a good place financially. So there's a lot at stake.
And here to explain to us just how much there is at stake is farm business consultant David Bolton.
The alarming thing is nobody's really paid a lot of attention to the business impact of this. They're talking about agriculture. We're just the forefront of the whole mass of industries around the rural community and closer inland as well. It's not good, not good. And they could possibly have actually had some element of consultation first. DEFRA didn't know what was going on. This is what's happened, and you now have a situation like this. The genie won't go back in the bottle now. I've seen tenant farmers given notice this autumn for lack of payment of rent. That's a bad sign. And I've seen that happen, and I've seen people struggling with bank managers or a number on a bank account, because you don't get bank managers these days. The cash flow for the industry is worrisome as well. And the figures that they're using are about 20% of the potential impact that's coming around the corner. There's been a mistake, I fear, that we should have reacted faster when that first awful announcement was listened to, and many things were hidden out of it as well. Fertiliser tax wasn't mentioned, cutting the BPS to almost nothing wasn't mentioned. There was a lot of stuff in the fine print that was well hidden. We should have reacted much more vigorously and faster, but we're probably coming up from behind because this passion isn't going to go away, and the government, well, it's going to be interesting to work out where the end is going to be. But I don't think the farmers today are saying we're giving up.
They certainly don't appear to be. We're looking forward to 2025 prospects for farming generally. It's going to be tough, isn't it?
Well, it's better than the start for 2024 harvest. It was soaking wet all November. Crop starts were poor. Getting sugar beet growing in the spring in 2024 wasn't very good. We've actually had an adequate harvest, but we ain't made much money because the prices of things has been poor. Prices next year have no great excitement coming, and therefore it's not going to be fun.
Sir Louise farm business consultant David Bolton there served his time. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. Come along to the protest, not a farmer himself, but somebody who during his long and distinguished career, shall we say, has advised a great number of farmers.
He has. I mean, lots of knowledge there, lots of expertise. He can absolutely see what this budget means for these businesses. He can look forward and tell us what some of the likely impacts are. And I have to say I agree with every word that he said.
David Bolton, one of the many people here from farming and the ancillary industries, and indeed, Louise, from the wider rural economy, who will all feel the effects of this government budget. Some of the placards getting the message across with humour. I've seen one portraying Prime Minister Keir Starmer as the Grinch at Christmas. I've also seen a placard on the back of a tractor which says, "Going for a nice day out in London. Thanks for your patience." But also, Louise, I've seen placards carried by people without any obvious farming connection at all. Placards that say no to net zero, placards calling for the UK to rejoin the EU. I've even seen one or two anti-vaxxer placards. There are people here who don't have much to do with farming, all trying to make their voices heard too.
Yeah, well, these sort of events do bring everybody out of the woodwork, don't they? And certainly we've met a few individuals today who are interesting, to say the least. Somebody's given us quite a good lecture about the evils of glyphosate today. Well, there you are. This is a tractor protest, but never mind. We've seen, as you say, the placards, the slogans. The strength of feeling on these things is pretty high as well, but not really probably what the main event was supposed to be all about.
Lots of different placards then, Louise. The one placard that I've seen again and again and again is this placard, black and white placard, simply with the message "with our farmers" and then #together. I've seen lots of those placards, many of them in tractor cabs, many of them held by people walking by the tractors as they go through the streets here. The message "with our farmers," that idea of unity, it seems on the face of it a really, really good one. But I think people are probably putting these placards in their tractor cabs without realising the whole story behind it.
I'm sure that they are, and I'm not sure that I know the whole story behind it, Johann. I'm not quite sure who produced those placards or if there is an organisation behind it. I just don't know. I mean, the message "with our farmers together," I get that. I think we've got to show a united front on this, but I'm not sure, as I said, where they originated from and who started off that message.
Now, I hadn't heard of hashtag Together before either. So while we've been recording this podcast, I decided to do a web search on my mobile phone, and I found out that hashtag Together is a hashtag used by the Together Declaration, an anti-lockdown, anti-vaxxer group initially, which started during the COVID pandemic and has since campaigned against net zero and indeed against anti-pollution measures, the expansion of the ULEZ zone here in London. So now they're here with these placards with our farmers together, that hashtag Together again. On the face of it, a straightforward message, but dig a little deeper and it's not a farming group. It's a hashtag with far wider connotations, expressing views that many of our listeners will be unaware of and indeed perhaps uneasy about supporting.
I certainly wasn't aware of that, Johann. That's good information. Thank you very much. Interesting point about the ULEZ charge, isn't it? I mean, Sadiq Khan will be delighted. He will have got a lot more money. I don't know if it's £12.50 for a tractor or if they have to pay more than that, but certainly he will have seen an increase in the coffers today.
He will indeed. Hundreds of tractors to pay the ULEZ charge. Farmers will be having to pay that or facing a fine for bringing tractors into the centre of London. To make sense of this wider picture, though, we've spoken to Ollie Fletcher, who's an agricultural historian, also a farmer from Leicestershire, and also a YouTuber behind the YouTube website Farming Explained.
I think the government are playing a very dangerous game because we're seeing farmers in the NFU, landowners in the CLA, and also urban environmentalists like George Monbiot who are criticising the government over the freezing of grant payments. And these three groups of people have very different cultures, they have very different interests, but we are seeing them unite into what is, I think, quite an unholy alliance against this government because their management of the countryside is so incompetent that everyone is getting angry about it.
You say an unholy alliance. At the very least, there are some unlikely bedfellows here, aren't there?
Yes. Well, I mean, I personally come from what I would consider to be a left-wing perspective. I believe in the post-war cheap food policy, as I think most farmers do on an intellectual level. But here I am fighting against the Labour Party. We are worker owners of the means of production, which surely is socialism in the traditional sense. But here we are fighting the Labour Party. I've just spoken on GB News, which, normally I would be against, but you have to take what you're given at this point. We're very much out here on our own. We are a socio-economic minority. We're not very strong. We have to do what we can to survive.
And can you put this event today in some sort of historical context as you see it? You farm yourself, but also you're a big communicator with the non-farming public.
Well, since the agricultural revolution, there had been a lot of conflict between the landowning class and farmers who were their tenants originally. But Lloyd George implemented death duties on aristocratic estates, which are very similar to this inheritance tax now. But when he did it, it was progressive because it broke up the aristocratic estates and allowed normal people like my family to own land for the first time. So in historical terms, the fact that we are here as workers and owners of the means of production, if you like, defending that, it is quite unusual. My village was owned by one person until 1919. The whole village, all the houses, all the farms, and then it was sold off, and since then the tenants were able to buy their own land and they're still there farming it now.
Does the government understand farming, do you think?
Well, no, I don't think the government does understand farming. Of course, we can ask whether it's incompetence or malice, but this, to me, is certainly a regressive tax. We have a very small farm in agricultural terms, 120 acres. We tried to hang on milking cows as long as we could because that was the only method of production intensive enough to make that viable. But now, with this tax, we would have to sell 2 or 3 fields, which as a parcel of land is of no agricultural use, but could be brought by an investor to get 100% exemption on inheritance tax, because that would be worth less than the £1 million threshold. So this tax, in practice, will create more opportunities for more people to exploit agricultural property relief to avoid paying tax. And it doesn't even hit the very wealthy. The government are claiming to target because they can get exemptions through something called national heritage assets, which means essentially if your generational wealth is so enormous that it's considered culturally significant, the government won't tax you on it. And very wealthy people have their land in trusts and in limited companies, and those things don't die. So it only hits the smaller farmer.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast here in London, with farmers protesting against the government's policies for agriculture. So where do things go from here, and will the government listen? Louise, when we first found out about this tractor protest, that it was going to take place, you posted a video from Kent farmer and protest co-organiser Matt Cullen on the Farmers Weekly WhatsApp group.
Yes, I did. I hadn't come across Matt before, actually, rightly or wrongly. So I thought it was going to be of interest to what he had to say and what their feelings were about whether the first protests had gone far enough, if you like, and some of the concerns that they have as a group of farmers. So it was good to hear what they have to say and to understand, if you like, the angle that they're coming from. And we've also managed to catch up with Matt Cullen today.
It's emotional because I never envisioned that there would be this amount of tractors turning up. This is more than beyond what we exceeded that we were going to have here. And I am absolutely great from the bottom of my heart. I cannot ask any more from farmers how much they've turned up today, and the miles and the distance that they've travelled all over they have come. And I just, from a warm heart, thank you ever so much.
And you say they've come from far and wide. This is an idea that you had that started with an initial posting on
yeah, so
media.
We started with Fairness of Farmers back in the spring. We'd come to London, we'd done it. We farmers wanted to come again with tractors, so we thought, why not? It's a 3-week period from when we were here on foot. So we decided we're going to pull it together and organise that everyone came on tractors. And today's been unbelievable.
And how many tractors are here? Do you know?
So I don't know exactly, but I know on a rough count when they were arriving, we're well exceeded over the 550. We're nearly probably 650 going to be here today.
And what happens next, Matt?
There's lots in the pipeline for next. I'm not going to give it away. I'm keeping that up my sleeve, but there is lots coming on, and we will keep pressure on this government.
You're not giving up yet?
We are not giving up, and I will keep fighting on behalf of the farming community as long as I can.
So that's Matt Cullen hinting that further action could be in the offing. We also, earlier on, Louise, managed to catch up with one of the organisers from the November protest, the first big protest in London, Ollie Harrison, who told us about a further event which will bring farmers together with other non-farming businesses at the London Palladium on Monday, the 16th of December.
What we want to do with that event is land with the press and the public and government, more importantly. The BPR is massive. APR is affecting owners of land and whatever. BPR affects tenants, contractors and wider businesses, and some of them will be paying 40%. How do they expect a multi-generational business to pay 40% at the death of someone? It's just bonkers.
So on Monday we can expect to see farmers and small business owners coming together.
And large business owners, yeah, to talk about the effects of the budget on with the BPR effect of the budget. Obviously we'll touch on APR at the same time, but I think people have just, one of the questions we keep getting thrown at us is, why shouldn't farmers pay inheritance tax? Well, I don't think anyone should. I personally don't think any business certainly should, especially when it's employing people producing food or manufacturing or leisure. There's lots of them. A lot of these hotels have huge asset value because of the location of them, but of course it's never been made liquid, and it should never have to be made liquid.
And the London Palladium, an unusual venue perhaps, a theatre in the heart of Theatreland in London. I understand that the pantomime that's on at this time of the year is Robin Hood.
It's ironic, isn't it, really? Yeah. Well, I mean, we got cold and wet last time, so we wanted somewhere warm and dry, didn't we?
And what can we expect to see at that event?
We would... I don't want to put too much out about the speakers yet, but we've got some leading politicians that want to be there. We're just deciding whether they're actually going to bring anything to the party more than actual real businesses talking about the real problems. So we're just going to come up with something over the weekend what we think will work best for everyone.
And beyond that, I mean, we've got Christmas, New Year. We go again in 2025?
Yeah, I think let everyone have a good Christmas. Hopefully the politicians will be having a bad Christmas because they'll be actually thinking about what they've done. And if we have to carry on and ramp it up in the new year, then off we go.
So Louise, Kent farmer Matt Cullen there, organiser, one of the co-organisers of today's tractor protest. Also Ollie Harrison, one of the co-organisers of last month's protest, both saying that further protests, further action of some kind could be in the offing after Christmas, should it be necessary, and should farmers feel that they're not being listened to.
Yeah, they've both said that, and I totally understand why they have said that. I think, of course, we've got Christmas coming up. We need to let everybody go home, enjoy their Christmas break, spend some time with their families. Anything that does happen from here, apart from the event that's organised for December the 16th, but anything that then does happen from here will take place in the new year with new energy and new thoughts really on where to go next. Of course, in the meantime, we might hear something from the government. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be nice indeed. Both sides then still looking like they're digging in for the long term over this inheritance tax issue, over the threat to farming livelihoods, and over what the landscape could look like for farming over the lifetime of this Parliament and indeed beyond. That's it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. Do remember to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and if you really like what you hear, do please leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast, including an update from that London Palladium get-together where farmers are going to join other businesses, large and small, to highlight the problems they're facing when it comes to dealing with the fallout from the autumn budget. But for now, thank you for listening. I'm Johann Tasker. Goodbye.
And I'm Louise Impey. Goodbye.